That was beautiful. Man, I wish I could take y'all with me. Diana, how long have we been riding together? Many years. Many years, many years, many years. Give me a moment to linger just a bit to express my love to my church. I love y'all. I love y'all. Truly, I would not be here without the love of my church family. I'm gonna linger, but I'll get myself together. But 19 years ago, y'all trusted me with your kids, and I was 19. And then I came back a very broken woman, unsure of what my next step should be. And FCC did what FC does so well, loves unconditionally. And you loved me. And you nurtured me. And you watered my soul. And you encouraged me. And then you made room for me. And then you allowed me to speak. And I found my way back to God because you chose to love me. So to say that FCC has a special place in my heart and would be an understatement. I just am so grateful, and I don't want you to ever forget the power that you have in this place. And I don't want you to ever lose sight of what unconditional love can do. I should say unconditional love and a whole lot of good cooks. A whole lot of good cooks. So I love y'all. So let's take a deep breath together and breathe in through our nose and out through our mouths. And one more time, just for the old time's sake, in through your nose and out through your mouth. So our parable today, I'm going to read it, Luke 12. Then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide his inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?" So he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater barns. And then I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, so you have many good things laid up. Take your ease, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be?" So it is with him who lays his treasures up in heaven and is not rich towards God. Lent is about examination. Lent holds the tension between despair and hope. The goal of Lent is to help us exercise our spiritual muscles. It's about self-reflection. It gives us an intentional built-in moment of time to own our own despair while extending an opportunity for us to lay claim to the hope of tomorrow. It acknowledges that despair is real. It is intense, but hope lingers on the heels of all despair. Lent holds space for us to name our fears while we remember our faith. It holds space for us to express our confusion while we confess our hope. Lent reminds us that today's mess can be tomorrow's message. Lent understands death, but its hope is in the resurrection. It offers us an opportunity to stretch our darkest days towards the glorious light of hope and healing. Lent is an extracurricular activity that says, though hope can never be your only plan, any plan that does not include hope must demand an immediate re-examination. If the situation is hopeless, then we must do the work of stretching that situation into the light of God's hope and love. Our text today is heavy on hopelessness and despair. When we look at the text, we can see there's a heckler, and he calls out to Jesus. He says, Jesus, tell my brother to give me my money. It's my money, and I want it now. Jesus responds, I'd really not rather get involved in family disputes. This is not the first time that Jesus responds with a no to someone's request. So it's not the no that bothers me. Have you ever said, I'm not going to say something, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to call, I'm not going to eat that last piece of pie, and before you can finish your sentence, you're doing the very thing that you said you were not going to do? Jesus states, I don't want to get involved. And then he turns around and he gets involved. He not only gets involved, but he takes it to 100, as they say in the street. That went from 0 to 100. Really? Let's look at this. A guy asked a very basic finance question. And Jesus' response was, you're greedy and you're going to die. Jeez, Jesus, can I get a phone call? Can I get a vow? Really, death? Death, Jesus? Seems like a harsh punishment for a guy whose only crime is working hard so he can play hard. Jesus' response bothers me. First, what's wrong with working hard so you can have a good life and play hard? What's wrong with building bigger, taller, fabulous, more spectacular buildings to hold all your bigger, larger, more spectacular things? No one wants to drudge in and out an office for 50 years just to get a plaque and a pen and a watch. The parable seems to me, in my opinion, it needs to be re-examined. If we interrogate Jesus' text, Jesus doesn't actually answer the question. What he does, he reads the guy's mail. The problem in reading someone's mail is that it's hard to set someone straight. It's hard to put someone in their place and still remember their value, their humanity. It's hard to extend hope when you are reminding someone of how hopeless they are or how hopeless their situation is. Hope needs a soft place to land. I'd probably write that down if I had a pen. Hope needs a soft place to land. The problem in the text, and this is going to fall on your ears very difficult. The problem in the text is that Jesus withholds hope from the guy. He has no access to forgiveness. Jesus has removed from the table any possibility of redemption. I mean, please. If you see me do something foolish, if you hear me say something foolish, give me a second chance. I don't know about you, but when I'm wrong, I still want to be reminded that there is hope and a possibility of redemption. The problem with this parable is that it makes a point but misses the message. So often when we read this story, we buy into narrative without much pushback or re-examination. Parables are meant to be stretched, and they are meant to stretch us. Parables are meant to be stretched, and they are meant to stretch us. Parables are meant to challenge us, but sometimes even parables need to be challenged. In order for a parable to accomplish its true purpose, it must make us feel something, think something. Lent is a good time to start rethinking some things. We get so caught up in a familiar focus that we forget that we can, in fact, push back against the text. We can, in fact, cross-examine the teller. Most often when we read this story, it is read with an emphasis on the rich man. Jesus tells us, don't be full of greed, which is important. But don't be full of greed is not the whole gospel. The corpus of the gospel is hope and redemption. I know it, you know it, Jesus knows it. Much like Jesus, sometimes we are focused on the small point. Greed is wrong and not the bigger message. We live in a world where everyone is trying to make a point, but have we forgotten the message of hope? I don't have to list everything that is wrong with the world. You get the point. If you have a TV, an iPhone, a Twitter account, you know what's wrong in the world. Greed is wrong, point. But are all those who fall to greed, all those who make mistakes, all of us who have messed up, fouled out, overstepped, did too much, said too much, did too little, didn't do enough, are we all hopeless cases? This parable leaves no room for redemption. And that is why it bothers me. I know a little something about redemption. I know a little something about second chances. How many of you know a little something about second chances and redemption? We know a little something about that. The problem in the world is that the powers of hope and redemption have taken a backseat to lesser powers. Greed is wrong. Lust is wrong. Gluttony is wrong. I could go down the list of things that are wrong. But you know what's a greater wrong? Never hearing that redemption and hope is yours for the asking. That's a greater wrong. Never having someone extend to you the arm of forgiveness, of friendship, of hope, of redemption, that's wrong. Parables are meant to stretch. Let me see you stretch. Stretch. Come on, FCC. They're meant to stretch. And doesn't that feel good? Oh. Parables are meant to stretch us. And those stories are not written in stone. We have to stretch this parable so that it reaches the light. Though hope and redemption are not a part of this parable, so long as Jesus is in the story, we can invoke life in a parable where there was only death. The parable needs a new profile picture. It needs a revamp. It needs a Lenten facelift. We learned that principle of rewriting stories from Jesus. Every time Jesus came in contact with someone who was sick, he rewrote their story. Every time he came in contact with someone who was lost, he rewrote their story. Every time he came in contact with someone who was broken, he rewrote their story. Every time he came in contact with someone who was rejected, come on FCC, y'all better wake up, rewrote the story. Every time he came in contact with someone who was sick, who was broken, who was in need, Jesus rewrote the story. Nobody should ever come in contact with the house of God and their story not be rewritten. Amen, Sonna. Hey, ho, yes. This is what the church is about. The church is about rewriting rewriting the story. Nothing is written in stone. No person is above redemption. No person is above being able to receive hope and grace of God's love. We can rewrite the story. That's what the purpose of the church is. The church is about pulling people in and saying, here, you can rewrite your story. Whatever your brokenness is, whatever your mistakes is, whatever, here is a place where you can, we got the pens, we got the pencils, and we got big old erasers. Because we've been washed in the blood. We've been changed by God. We've rubbed up against mercy. We understand grace. And because we were recipients, we can now freely give. When the church refuses to extend redemption, when the church sits on its hands on the message of hope, when everyone else is panicking and the church joins in the fray, that is the problem. We must wave our banner of hope. We must wave our banner of forgiveness so that the world can see and come and know and be a part. Jesus is in the business of rewriting stories. And if we interrogate the text of the parable, we can see that this rich young ruler is broken. He is in desperate need of a moment of self-reflection. Imagine the parable that ends with the rich man hearing his fate, and he replies like David, "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sins. Purge me like hyssop. Wash me till I be made whole. Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Restore to me the joy of my salvation and uphold your generous spirit." Imagine someone in jail and they're receiving their sentence. And there's someone with a message of hope that says, this is not the final story. We are here. That is the power of the church. That is the power of what it means to be a member of the body. You may not remember, but back in the 90s, American Express had a series of commercials. These commercials were full of like exotic vacations and multi-course gourmet meals, and the commercials would end the phrase with, "Membership has its privileges." Y'all remember that? We too, as members of First Christian Church, we have this privilege. We have this power to extend an invitation for anyone who needs a rewrite. Come here. Come here. We specialize in rewriting. We specialize in the message of hope. We specialize in the message of redemption. We as members of God's community have been given the power to speak life when someone else says death. We have been given the power to spread hope when things appear hopeless. Membership has its privilege. Somebody ought to know that. We should be willing to tell anyone who will listen about the rewards of being a member of the body of Christ. As members, we have access to these privileges. God promises beauty for ashes. That's a privilege. God promises the oil of joy instead of despair. That's a privilege. God promises the garment of praise instead of a spirit of heaviness. That's a privilege. God promises us unlimited hope and redemption. No parable, no circumstance can ever take you from God's power to redeem and the ability to hope. No parable, no situation can ever separate you from the redeeming power of a God who loves you. No parable, no situation, no dark night can separate you from God's hope and his redemptive powers. Amen.